The Power Moms Network, empowering moms to lift the world.
Welcome. I'm Riley Karsh.
I'm Tova Kopan.
We are thrilled to bring you the We Go Boldly podcast.
Let's talk big burning questions, life changes, and maybe a bit of personal business.
Let's be bold and brave together. Are you ready?
I am. Here comes the show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to We Go Boldly, the podcast, where we are very excited to be members of the Power Moms Network. Power Moms Network empowers mothers to empower other mothers. It's a fantastic place to be. We love it. We're thrilled to be there. We hope you'll join us. You can check them out online and join the community at any time. With that being said, it is season 11. It is a doozy today. I am like, I don't know if I'm ready for this episode. And I'm gonna be honest with you all, I got my flu and COVID vaccines both yesterday. And like I'm not sick from it. That's not how it works for me, but I am very confused and tired. So it's not clear if that comes from the vaccines for me or if it's just motherhood and exhaustion combined. So bear with me as we get through this topic of today. We're talking all about your inner child and your shadow. Heavy. And before I tell my fun story about the book I'm reading that like brings this all together for me, I'm going to say hello to Tova because I'm just rambling at this point and welcome her to the show. How are you today, Tova? It's a lovely, almost fall day here on the Northeast.
Yeah, so I'm going to tell you a story. It's not a long story, but I'll probably tell it long. I'll try not to. I just put the timer on so I can pay attention and stay focused a little
Here,
bit.
wait, I'm giving you 1 minute. Go.
Okay. So, life has been coming at me fast. And what I like to think about is this is one of those times I'm like, by the time you listen to this episode, I'll be on the other side of a lot of what is making life right now exciting and stressful. And when I say I'm busy, I don't mean, oh, I'm frantic, I'm busy. I'm like, I just have a legit ton of stuff to do in a very short period of time. You and I are recording a ton of episodes in preparation for your surgery, and then also just trying to make big decisions in preparation to give you the much needed rest that you're needed afterwards that you were so gracious to give me. And it's perfect timing because it's going to be when I'm also starting a new job. So I'll be able to like hyper focus on that job, but it means I'm also hyper focusing right now on the end of my job and just working a ton. And so the story that I'm telling you is on Wednesday, I was very, very stressed and I decided to take a bath. And at some point during that bath afterwards, I don't know, I hit a wall of stress and just the stress sort of just like left my body and left me exhausted. And it was almost like my body then yesterday no longer knew how to handle stress. It was like the bath I stayed in too long. And it was like my body's knowledge of how to deal with stress seeped out of me. And so yesterday was just a weird day of, maybe a little manic, like just get it done. We were prepping for our next episode. And I was saying, yeah, in my head, I finished stuff, but I just thought about it. I didn't actually do it.
Yeah.
And, last night I knew, I'm not going to let myself stay up late. I know I want to do work. I have stuff to do, but I'm going to go to bed early because that is the responsible thing to do. And I am listening to my body and my body says it's tired. So I went to bed early, not early, just like on time, and ended up having the longest, most detailed, most ridiculous anxiety dream I have ever had in the entirety of my 43 years. And I mean, we're talking, there was fire. There was a person who was able to explode the earth. President Obama and I were buds. He wanted to lift my spirits and was taking me to something, but wanted to surprise me. Why? Why wouldn't he tell me where we were going? Because of anxiety. Then we get there and it's like a celebrity dinner, which apparently I've been to on a number of times. Who knew? But I kept not having pants on because, anxiety. Then I kept going to the bathroom because I was worried I was going to have to pee once we sat down for the seated dinner. Anxiety. I mean, and I finally at 5:30, I just made myself wake up and be like, well, this sleeping thing isn't working. Clearly. We're talking yesterday. I ordered a book for book club because I thought next week was going to be the date of the book club, and it clearly wasn't going to come in time from the library, only to realize the moment I hit buy it now on the Kindle, no, book club is actually in 2 weeks. So that is, today is like a mental recovery day, but also I have a little of that, like, well, I haven't slept enough, but then it was filled with anxiety, like energy.
Yeah, I have a lot of that. I haven't slept enough energy where you kind of get like hyperactive. It's when your kids hit that second wind and they don't go to sleep and you're like, no, make it stop.
Yes,
that's where my brain is.
So we're both there. That's
yeah,
fun.
It's gonna be a fun episode.
There's no grounding force here.
No, none at all. And what's great about that is that we're talking about inner child and shadow work. And those are like really deep, heavy topics that we have some personal experience with that definitely clouds our view of things. I will say that I did the research for this episode, but I've done it, I don't know, I probably did it a month ago. And if you know me and you've been listening for any length of time, you know that my short-term memory does not exist and I don't remember things. So it's something I work on. And if anyone has an app that helps you with that, shoot me a DM because like I really would like to be better about it.
I mean, I'm going to just raise my hand and say my grandma used to watch the Game Show Network.
Yeah, like, no, I love game shows
all the time.
And I'm very good at crossword puzzles. It's the short-term memory that I struggle with. But anyway, so let's move on to our topic for today. It's going to be a little windy. We're talking about inner child. What does that mean? I'm going to define a couple things for us. I'm going to skip around a little bit in my outline here so I can get the definitions out. So if you're listening and you didn't grow up in the 90s and didn't have a parent who dealt with any of this stuff, we're going to explain it to you and you'll understand it by the end. So inner child is a psychological concept. It represents the childlike aspects of our personality and emotional state. It's a metaphorical way of describing the younger parts of us that can sometimes emerge when we are faced with a stressful or traumatic situations. I read that, somebody else's words. I cannot remember who it is. If it's you and you want attribution, by all means, let me know. When we talk about inner child, we're talking about, like they say in that little snippet I just read to you, it's a metaphorical description, right? You don't actually have another little human being living inside you unless you're pregnant. And so it is, however, a great way to think about the you that existed before all of the stuff got layered on top of you, right? From like culture, from parents, family dynamics, schools, whatever. It's the kind of core young little you. And sometimes that core young little you is super healthy and like got everything they needed when they were little and feels great about life. And sometimes, the opposite is true, and more often than not, somewhere in between. So that's the inner child. That's what we're talking about there. When we talk about shadow work, a lot of people, and this was what made me think about the book I'm reading, which is, shocker, can't remember the name of it. But it's about like Greek gods who put together this like Hunger Games type battle with mortals and stuff and whatever. But the reason it makes me think of shadow work is Hades is like the main male character and he's enlisted a mortal to help him fight this battle or whatever. And he's like hated and, feared and all those things. But when it's the main male character and the main female character talking, you get to see his like soft, mushy core. And that's kind of how I think of shadows, our shadow. And so really it represents the part of ourselves that we reject or hide. And sometimes I think for some people, it represents the false version of ourselves that we put out into the world. And that's a defense mechanism and it keeps us safe from some things sometimes, but that's really what happens. So just to give you an official definition, it is a concept that was popularized by Carl Jung. If you've ever taken a psychology class, he is a huge part of the beginnings of psychology. And so Carl Jung said that the shadow is that hidden, repressed, for the most part inferior and guilt-laden personality whose ultimate ramifications reach back into the realm of our animal ancestors. If it has been believed hitherto that the human shadow was the source of evil, it can now be ascertained on closer investigation that the unconscious man, that is, his shadow, does not consist only of morally reprehensible tendencies, but also displays a number of good qualities, such as normal instincts, appropriate reactions, realistic insights, creative impulses, etc. And the reason I read that whole thing to you is because I want to make it clear that this is not a moral judgment. Shadow is not good or bad. It is. Inner child, not good or bad, simply is, exists. And so I don't want us to get mired down in that concept, that culturally created idea that this is all good or all bad, because that's not a real thing. That's not how the real world actually exists. There's a lot of gray areas. So those are my definitions to get us started. That was a lot of information to, to take in. So we'll be sure to include, I think, the definitions in the show notes, because I think they're super important in this case. I mean, we always love to define things, but like particularly here, we need to understand what we're working with.
Yeah, and I think particularly if this is your first time hearing about like this inner child concept, I think it can be a great explanation or way to have an understanding of when you are needing something, whether it's you're needing something in a relationship or you're needing something in the world, and you are needing something and you're not totally understanding why you're needing it. Like you're looking for validation, or maybe you're looking for something, and or you're feeling certain insecurities, and yet you're logically feeling very confident and very secure, and you're not, and you're like, I don't understand why I'm feeling this way, or I don't understand what's going on here. And I think that understanding the fact that if you have had wounds, which is, something they like to use in this kind of conversation, or something happened as a child, if you've just grown up but not addressed some of the inner child stuff, some of the stuff that was happening to you as a child, those issues, those concerns, those things that bothered you as a child are still there. And so it can be why you as an adult are like feeling great and confident in a way, and then you are also at the same time feeling nervous or concerned or stressed, or not feeling confident and feeling insecure. And it's like, wait a minute, I don't understand, how am I feeling both of these things at one time? And it can be, well, the adult you is really feeling great, and the adult you is really feeling confident, and you have dealt with things, and you have the logic, but there's this part of you that you've not totally dealt with yet. And at least to me, that's a good way to help kind of understand, and also understand our feelings, and understand why we are, having these multiple feelings at one time.
Yeah, and something I read in the research I did specifically about our inner child was kind of self-evident, but also mind-blowing at the same time. I love those things. But what I read was in a study that was done, somebody wrote how we were taken care of by adults as children is often how we take care of ourselves as adults. So if you grew up in a household, the example they give is if you grew up and the message you received at home was that strong emotions were not allowed, as an adult, you're likely to feel ashamed or embarrassed when big feelings come up for you. And that translates into a million different things that you might have experienced as a child that then later as an adult, you're like, why do my big feelings make me feel like I need to suddenly be quiet and hide and like lock myself in a bathroom? Or, why do I reach for chips every time I have a feeling, right? Like, why are these things how I deal with stuff? Why do I yell at my kids? I mean, I know why I yell at my kids because they never do what I ask them to the first time. But like, aside from that example, right? Like, if your first reaction is to yell, right, when you get angry, is that what happened when you were a kid? Did you make a mistake and then everybody just yelled at you? These are like very common, not that like, um, I just I don't want people to take away from this some sort of moral failing. It happens. It's a part of, and whether you're the parent in the equation or the kid in the equation, like nobody is perfect. And we just want people to start to have the self-awareness to make the changes that they want to be able to make. That's what this is really about.
Yeah, and I also, I guess, to me, it helps explain, and I'm always looking for explanations, right? And a way to figure things out, why you can feel like on paper everything might be clicking and you're still struggling with something. You
Yeah.
still, because if you haven't, I don't want to say taken care of it, like you can like check it the box.
Oh, that would
But
be nice.
I know, wouldn't it be lovely? But honestly, like I think that there have been times where you and I have had the experience of, once you acknowledge that, oh, okay, these feelings are, whether it's inner child or something else, and I know that's where they're coming from, not to say that you don't need to deal with them, but they do lose some of the control,
Yeah.
right? They're not controlling every single movement. Or, I have not admittedly done a lot of work in the world of shadow work. I have a journal that I do plan to use one of these days when I sit down. I had big plans for Labor Day. COVID happened, but one of these days it's going to be me in that journal. But when I can look at something and say, oh, okay, this makes sense, and later I'm going to journal about it, and I can just like put a pin in it. I think that that allows you to continue on the life, and you're not ignoring it, but we recognize, because we can't be psychoanalyzing everything every moment of every day as much as we enjoy it and maybe try
And
to.
maybe do.
But that most people don't want to and don't
Yeah.
try to, and that like you need to be able to put a pin in things to continue to function and move about your day, right? Like you need to be able to be like, oh, okay, that was an interesting feeling. I'm recognizing that feeling. It doesn't make sense. I'm aware of it, right? Like, and now I'm going to be able to circle back with my therapist, or circle back when I'm journaling, or maybe find a book where I talk about it or learn more
Right.
about it. And whatever level you're at, where you want to find more information about it. But I do think that learning both about even just the existence of this concept of inner child and shadow work
Yeah.
can be incredibly eye-opening, because it's like, wait a minute, this person I'm in a relationship with, or my husband, has done nothing to give me any sort of signs that I should be insecure about this, and yet I'm bringing all of this stuff in, and I don't know why. Or and I just started a book last night, that the woman was saying like, yeah, my reaction to X, Y, or Z is because that's what I saw in my mom. Now clearly she's like very self-aware,
Yeah.
and I'm sure that that's going to be part of the excitement of the book. But like, like not everybody is that self-aware, and it can be
Yeah.
very frustrating when we've talked about you're telling yourself a story. You don't know why you're telling yourself this story, because as you're telling yourself the story, as you're getting mad at somebody or getting frustrated with yourself or frustrated with your kids, you don't even know why you're getting frustrated with yourself or your kids. It can be so frustrating. So having some of this understanding can be really helpful.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about like signs that your inner child needs attention. And when I say needs attention, it doesn't mean that you need to fix everything, right? It's like you said earlier, Tova, it's not about checking a box. It's about building self-awareness and starting to recognize what signs relate to your inner child struggles, and that maybe there's a wound there, that maybe you need to address some things and maybe seek therapy or coaching or journaling or whatever it is. And so the first flag really are recurring negative patterns and emotional triggers, right? Like that's to me the first flag. But I have a whole list here from, one of those 4,000 signs that your inner child is sad. Um, and the first one, oh, the first one hurts. It's a deep feeling that there is something wrong with you. So if you go through life and you're like, it's me, I'm the problem, about everything, if you think, you're always the cause of the shortcomings, the mistakes, the bad things that happen in your life, you're not lovable, you're not worthwhile, that is a very clear sign that something isn't working, right? That like something isn't going right deep inside you, and it is very likely tied to your childhood and your inner child. Um, a couple more signs, then I'll turn it over to you, Tova. Yeah,
I was
go
just
ahead.
going to say something. I want to highlight something you said. You could say, like, when we're saying inner child, like, you could easily just be saying, like, it's something from your childhood.
Yeah.
It's something from your childhood. Like, that, but I think there's this concept of that came about, like you said, really highlighted in the 90s, that we are all carrying this inner child with us from our childhood that may still need to be nurtured, that may still need to have their needs addressed that were not addressed from childhood. So
Yeah.
if you're listening to this and you're like, what are they even talking about? Then every time one of us says inner child, just be like, from your childhood.
Right.
Like,
Yeah, just replace it. I agree with
yeah,
that.
because
Yeah.
it's the same concept, but it's still something you're carrying with you from your childhood.
Yeah, because let's talk about that just a little bit more. Your foundational years, those very early developmental years, really dictate the core of you, right? Can you overcome the things that happen in your life? Of course you can. Is it easy? Absolutely not. But those growth years, those foundational years, your family systems, the culture you live in, the people you're surrounded by dictate a lot of how you feel and think about yourself and about the world around you. And you carry that with you even if you don't agree with it, even if consciously you're like, I don't think that way, that doesn't make any sense to me, I don't
Yeah.
like that way of thinking, it's still embedded in you and you have to actively work against it, right? So a couple more flags. Being a people pleaser, I think that's a flag for a lot of things, but it certainly can indicate that something happened. Being a rebel and feeling alive when you're in conflict with someone else. Some of these are so vague to me that I'm like, well, that could really be anything. You could just be oppositional.
Well, people also talk about, I mean, not to like throw a wrench into the system here, but like people also talk about addressing their inner teenager.
Yeah.
Like, and sometimes they have their inner, like, and it makes sense that like each stage of your life, there's something, and if you haven't resolved it, it's kind of following through you. So maybe the rebel one, you're like, well, my 6-year-old, although my 8-year-old does kind of check in some of the boxes, and I know your
Oh, my
7-year-old
7-year-old does.
does definitely check some of those boxes. But like, being a rebel might not make sense if you're like, wait, I'm a people pleaser and a rebel. And it's like, well,
Right.
no, you might not be both, obviously, but also maybe you were as a child and then you were something else as a teenager, and that's why you are so freaking frustrated and confused sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. So continue with the list. Being a hoarder, not being able to let go of possessions and people, experiencing anxiety with something new, feeling guilty for setting boundaries, driven to be a super achiever, perfectionism, having trouble starting and finishing tasks, constant self-criticism, feeling ashamed when you express emotions, being ashamed of your body, distrust of anyone else, super conflict avoidant, and then a fear of abandonment, right? So can these all be caused by things that happen at any point in your life? Of course, absolutely. We start with the inner child because that's where we all started, right? We started as that little person. And you want to start at the beginning. So if you look back at that little person and you're like, everything was really great until I was 15. Okay, so fast forward, what happened when you were 15, right? Like what started influencing you? What could be causing some of these flags and triggers? I think that covers some of what you were saying too, Tova.
Yeah, definitely. And also, and I don't know that we're gonna get into this, and this is kind of this is the same but different. Depending on the size of trauma that you have experienced, and maybe it's not the size of the trauma, but the size of the impact of a trauma on you,
Yeah.
more accurately, which could be anything, could, impact somebody significantly. There's no like trauma Olympics here where you're like, how big is it?
Right. Mine's the biggest.
Yeah. But you can get stuck at that age, right? So and when we talk trauma can be a quote good thing, right? Like they have done, I don't know if study is the right word. They have looked at people who have become celebrities and struggled as they have gotten older when they became celebrities at a younger age. And those celebrities, when they have talked about it later, like the ones who have opened up, have talked about how they had to work very hard to get beyond that maturity level and mental age of when they became a celebrity. Right. And in theory, that's a quote good thing, right? They became famous and successful at 14 or 12, or poor Drew Barrymore was 4.
Right.
And so, but they kind of got stuck at that growth age. And so sometimes there's a very close relationship between the 30-year-old you behavior and the 5-year-old you.
Yeah.
Closer than you'd realize.
Yeah, for sure. We need to take a quick break. So why don't we do that? And when we come back, we'll dive a little bit into what shadow work is and, some signs that maybe it's time to do a little shadow work. And then we'll close it all out with some how-tos. Don't worry. We're going to give you some practical suggestions as well. But before all that, let's take a quick break, everyone, and we will be right back. Well, hello there, ladies. Are you ready to elevate your life and connect with like-minded souls? Join us every week at the Go Boldly Together weekly Women's Circle, where strength meets sisterhood. Dive into empowering discussions, share your victories, and navigate challenges together. Our circle is a safe space for growth and inspiration. Experience the power of collective wisdom and unleash your full potential. Don't miss out on the transformative energy. Click the link in our show notes or visit us at goboldlyinitiative.com/women's weekly group to learn more about our Go Boldly Circle today. Together, let's embrace the journey of personal development and let's celebrate that unstoppable force within each of us. Okay, welcome back to the show. So before the break, we went through a bunch of signs and flags or whatever that indicate that maybe, it's time to do some inner child reflection. Let's talk a bit about shadow work, and then we'll, like I said before, we'll get into the how do you do this of it all. So I think, we define shadow work for you guys, and I just want to reiterate, I guess, that, the shadow isn't all good, all bad. It isn't all anything. If we didn't have multiple facets to our personality, we would be, one-dimensional and super boring. Like, that's just the reality of it. It gives us depth and balance. It gives us counterpoints to some of the things that we exhibit on the other side of the coin. And really, when we do shadow work, the goal is to integrate all of those parts of your personality, who you are, and allow all of that to come out. It's like when we talk about authenticity, living authentically means integrating the parts of yourself that you like and the parts that you don't like, and getting all of that to sort of work together. So when we don't address our shadow side, the research shows that it can lead to self-sabotage, relationship issues, and sort of a fragmented sense of self. So, for example, like if you see yourself as like great, outgoing, extroverted, all these wonderful things, and then you do something or you behave in a way that doesn't align with that, which all of us do, let's be honest, that can be sort of confusing, right? That's fragmented. Like you're not like, wait, but that's not who I thought I was, but I'm doing it. How do I, like, what is that about? I must be bad, right? So we go to these all or nothing thought processes that really are not helpful in any way. So when we talk about why, like, what is a shadow, what is the shadow work about? Um, so we talk about things like anything that sort of threatens the way you present yourself to the world, right? So anything that brings your shadow into the light kind of can be seen, you can feel like that's a threat to you, who you are, which is what I was sort of just describing to all of you. So it's important to address these things, right? They can lead to self-loathing, poor self-esteem. It can lead to self-deceit, lying to yourself, anxiety and depression, offensive behavior. All of this sounds so awful. Struggling to have healthy relationships, self-sabotage, self-absorption, and inflated ego. And like it goes on and on.
Yeah.
And I think most importantly, what I read in the research and what I've experienced in my own personal life is that when you reject your shadow side, you project it onto other people. So it's that saying that we all, certainly as parents, but everyone else, you don't like the things in other people that you don't like in yourself, right? And you like maybe attack them for it, or you criticize them for it, or judge them for it. And these are the same things oftentimes that we see in ourselves, that we don't like but aren't willing to acknowledge.
Yeah, and I think that it's a confusing concept. But I like I, I don't know. I like this, I when I think about probably the reason I'm hesitant to like dive into this journal that's focused on shadow work. And it talks about common fears and resistance associated with shadow work. And it's like the fear of unknown and resistance to change and all of this stuff. And one of the quotes that you shared was like, I'm not going to misquote it despite the fact that's like right in the outline in front of me, but like without light, you can't have darkness, or wait, without darkness, you can't have light.
Both, really. Where
Both,
there is
yeah.
light, there must also be shadow.
There we go. And, I think there is like, there's this fear of like, but what if I find something worse about myself than I even think there might be in there? And I think for the most part, you're not going to find that. Like, I think that we tend to be so much harder on ourselves than anyone else that could possibly be out there, especially if you're being self-reflective. Like, I'm sure there are loads of people that go through the world without any ounce of self-reflection, and I've wondered what that's like.
Yeah.
I bet it's fun. Or
Next
not.
life.
I don't know. Who's to
Next
say?
life.
But like, they go through the world and they're not sitting around going, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. Like, what did I do that wrong? Should I have done this differently? Should I do this differently? Like, what should I do? And they're not questioning everything. And that must be an interesting path. But I can assure you that like, you're not going to, you might find trauma that you suppress. There's all sorts of things you can find when you start like digging deep.
Yeah.
But the fact is, like, in all likelihood, you will not like yourself less than you do right now. Like, what you're going to do is you're going to find reasons for things. You're going to learn about yourself, and it's going to be a good thing. It's going to be a good conversation that you have with yourself as you get to know yourself better.
Yeah. The more you accept yourself as you are, the better you're going to feel. Like
Yeah.
it's a very basic, I think, fundamental truth that the more you accept about yourself, the better you will feel. It is so hard to do. It is super hard to accept things about yourself that you're like, ooh, that's not awesome, right? Like, I didn't want to be that judgmental, or I didn't want to like be a yeller, or obviously I yelled at my kids. Well, I don't think I even yelled at my kids this morning. I just have it in my head. Um, but when we try to identify shadow traits, right? Like the parts of us that make up our shadow, it really what the research shows is that usually it comes up as negative self-talk. And of course, often those rejected parts of ourselves are the result of childhood experiences, life experiences. It could be later in life. It doesn't have to be childhood, but that's why we're combining these two topics. And so like if the voice in your head is constantly berating you for being judgmental, right? That's a sign that this is a part of your shadow, a part of your shadow personality. And it's something to look at. It doesn't mean it's something to change. It means it's something to notice and acknowledge and maybe accept. Like, yeah, I am a little judgmental of, um, I don't know. I can't think of anything because I don't know why, but I am judgmental at times. So I'm not even trying to pretend. I just can't think of an example. But those are the kinds of things that give us insight into where do those shadow aspects of our personality live? Like, what are they? And yeah, like as you said, Tova, there are tons of fears and there's a lot of resistance to shadow work. Even if you're not calling it shadow work, even if you're just calling it self-awareness or authenticity or,
Yeah.
like knowledge of yourself, any of those things. And having self-doubt, the idea that you're gonna uncover some sort of severe trauma and negative emotions. You might. I mean, I think
Yeah.
most of us won't. You might. Um, it's a great opportunity for therapy. It's a great opportunity to, or your church group or your we have our weekly women's circle, great place to talk about things. These kinds of support groups or sisterhoods or your friends or family, great place to talk through some of this stuff as long as you're talking to supportive folks.
Well, and the fact is, like, whatever you're going to find, it's affecting you anyway. It's
Right.
affecting your decisions. It's
Yeah.
affecting how you're dealing with your life and reacting to people. It's doing its job, whether
Yeah.
you want to recognize it or not.
Yeah, ignoring it isn't going to change anything. It's just
Yeah.
going to continue to do what it does because it's there to protect you or keep you safe or help you along the way. So that's the shadow of it all. Let's take another quick break, and when we
Yep.
come back, we'll work through some of these techniques, and they're going to overlap for healing through inner child work, for embracing your shadow, all that stuff. So we will be right back after this break, everyone.
Hey there, pod family. Have you ever wished you could stay in the loop with a little slice of transformation and inspiration delivered straight to your inbox? Well, you're in luck because now you can. Introducing our fantastic newsletter, your VIP pass to all things exciting and informative. Join our community of growth-minded souls. Get the hottest topics delivered right to your inbox. It's quick, easy, and totally free. Just head over to our website at goboldlyinitiative.com and sign up for our newsletter today. Don't miss out on the next big thing. Stay connected with us. Subscribe now and get ready for some big, bold love.
Okay, welcome back to the show. So before the break, we promised you some like, how do I do it of it all? Because, we've given you a lot of information. It's a lot of heavy information. It is stuff that Tova and I have worked on, continue to work on, will continue to like address personally, individually with our therapists, with our coaches, with all the people. So we're right there with you in this whole, I don't know, doozy of an episode. I keep saying doozy like I'm 75. So how do we heal? How do we like address these things? When we're talking about the inner child. So we're talking about, you said this earlier, Tova, we're talking about nurturing, right? We're talking about caring for and being kind and empathetic and compassionate and those kinds of things. So, just a couple of things to highlight. Meeting unmet needs, right? So if your flags are telling you that there's some unmet need in your life that like is impacting your mental, physical, emotional well-being, learning how to give that thing to yourself as an adult will really start the process of addressing it. So if you grew up in a home where things were super unpredictable and you couldn't rely on people and you didn't know what was going to happen next, and that creates a lot of unbalance and fear and anxiety and all those things. So what you would do is make it a priority in your adult life to show up for yourself, to do the things you tell yourself you're going to do, to take care of yourself. It's not the same, right? Like it's not going to go back and change history. it's going to teach your brain and your soul and your spirit how to accept that there is someone you can rely on, that not everything is like crazy and chaotic, that you will be there for yourself.
Well, and if you have struggled showing up for yourself and being there for yourself, like if it's really, you can always be there for other people. If you've taken Gretchen Rubin's, it's not a personality tendencies test, and you're one of those people who you show up when somebody else is going to be there, right? And that's how you do accountability. And you've always struggled to show up for yourself. Maybe it's because as a kid, you were taught that you didn't deserve to have someone be reliable for, like that. And it wasn't that your parents were intent, like no one is putting intent on any of this, just so we're clear. Like it wasn't that your parents were intentionally like not reliable, but they had a lot of balls in the air and they were just not reliable, and it was chaotic and it was busy. And so you learned that that was not something that you deserved, or at least something you thought that you deserved. And so instead, you can be incredibly reliable for other people, but you're not very good at being reliable for yourself. And it could be something that you have criticized yourself for over and over and over. And so as part of this meeting unmet needs, there's a lot of nurturing that has to happen and kindness that has to happen, right? Because, and this is where it's really helpful to have either a group, coach, a therapist, just somebody there kind of like helping you connect the dots. Because these are, not only are they hard to connect to dots, but they're hard dots to connect, but they're hard dots to connect. Like sometimes they're hard to see. And then once you see them, they're hard to do. But to realize like, you're not an unreliable person. That's not why you can't rely on yourself. You're incredibly reliable. The whole world relies on you. It's that you don't think you deserve to have someone like to be to have someone always there for you.
Yeah.
And so it's a lot.
So much of this comes down to your feelings of worthiness.
Yeah.
There's a lot of layers on top of that, I think. But like if you keep digging and digging and digging and shoveling the dirt off, you more often than not, I think we get down to feelings of being unworthy and unlovable. And that's so hard to overcome, but it can be done. And it requires consistently rechecking and rechecking. It's not like a one and done kind of scenario. Which is like so depressing.
Well, because and just to say why, it's because like you said, like things that happen to you as a child take root and they dig deep. And so one acknowledgement of going, oh, my life was chaotic as a kid and I don't think that I can rely on other people. That's why I don't. That's not going to undo it all. It doesn't suddenly unravel everything.
Right. Just a couple more from the list of ways you can connect and nurture with your inner child. And I forgot to say this earlier, but a lot of people call this reparenting. I don't love that term because it's not always a parent that causes these things. Sometimes it's society, sometimes it's circumstance. So I'm that's why I haven't really used it, but it is a term that gets used a lot. And if you decide to do your own research on this or whatever, you will encounter it. So just wanted to put that out there. Setting boundaries. This is something, we've talked about on this show at length, so I'm not going to go deep into it, but boundaries are important. Boundaries are especially important for children. When you don't have boundaries as a child, wow, that can really mess things up. So attend to that if that's you. Emotional support, right? If you feel like, you didn't get your emotion, you weren't allowed to have your emotions, or your emotions were dismissed or anything like that, that can come up. You can, be continuing that behavior later into life. Self-compassion is absolutely necessary for this inner child work. You cannot help yourself heal if you aren't being kind to yourself about it, right? And especially if you didn't receive a lot of compassion when you were a kid, if you like grew up in a strictly sarcastic household, if you grew up in a household where no one ever touched each other, these kinds of things can make it super hard to feel and dole out that kind of self-compassion that you need.
Yeah. I like this one. I think this is fun and really, really important to do, but learning to be playful again. I think that, it is it is hard to remember that playing can be fun as an adult because even when you have kids and you're like playing with them, you're not really playing. I mean, some adults are really good at like getting into the moment and getting on their knees, but like and like playing with the kids. But like sometimes it's really not that much fun to play with your kids, right? Because like it's I don't know, it's boring and they want to do it their way. And like if you have a way that you want to do it, like they don't want to do it your way. And so you don't actually get to be playful. So when I say be playful, and it says as adults, many of us have forgotten how to play. Find things that you consider to be play. Like it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be like playing with like your kid. If you have kids, I would not encourage you to play with like other random little kids.
Yeah, that could strange. Go wrong.
But like maybe you're like, but I don't like to play with my kids, and maybe you do, and either way there's not a wrong answer to that. But like there could be things that you genuinely enjoy doing that is fun and is play to you. It doesn't have to be the same thing that it was when you were 6 or that your 6-year-old likes, but it can be play.
Yeah. And I think it's really important. And then I'll let you continue to note play doesn't have a purpose.
Mm-hmm.
You're not playing to get somewhere, to win something. That's not what we mean when we say play. Play is really just for the purpose of play. And that's it.
Yep. I think other good to-dos, obviously journaling is always a good task when it comes to this, and thinking about experiences that you have had when you think your inner child may be triggered, or just if you think about a different way that like things from your childhood are coming back up, right? But also, and I really like this one, letter writing, like see what it feels like to write a letter to your inner child, telling them what you think they might need to hear. And if you want to have a correspondence back and forth, go for it. But like even if it's just you writing to this child, and if you don't want to think about it as your inner child, then just say, all right, I'm going to write to 6-year-old Tova and tell her what I think she would need to hear. I'm going to write to 10-year-old Tova and tell her what she needs to hear. It can be, I think, a really eye-opening experience, because in many ways, I think for me, this is maybe the first time when I started hearing about this concept that I actually maybe started understanding this whole inner child thing, was when I was like, oh, okay, yeah, there is stuff that person maybe needed to hear, or that I would want to, or not that they needed to hear, but that I would want to tell them now.
Yeah.
That I know now that they needed to hear.
Yeah. And in that same vein, I find it super helpful to do inner child meditations. So if you're a visual person, like if you think in pictures, it is, and you can tolerate it, there are a ton of guided meditations on this. And it's a great way to give your inner child the hug that they needed, a high five, talk to them. You can sort of go through these guided meditations and reconnect with that younger version of yourself that maybe needed a hug, that needed to be told they were worthy, that needed the words of affirmation or whatever they needed. And it is wooey and it is spiritual, and that's all fine. Like that's good. It's not a bad thing. So if you're like, oh, I don't know, I don't really believe in that. You don't have to. You can still try it and see how it feels.
Yep.
There's a really long list here. And some of them are repetitive. I think really what it comes down to is figuring out the things that will nurture your spirit, soul, younger version of yourself, nurture you emotionally, and not materialistic things, right? Not like superficial things where you're scrolling through, and there's nothing wrong with this, and I do it all the time, but where you're scrolling through Instagram and just sending memes back and forth to your friends. I do it constantly, let's be honest. But that's not what we're really focused on right now. We're focused on the sort of more deep and meaningful ways in which you can connect with the version of you that lives deep inside that didn't get something, right? Whatever it is.
Yeah.
And all of that can help you integrate your personality so that it is more cohesive, so that you are feeling more authentic. You're feeling more like who you are meant to be, and less like, who you were told you were. And this goes back to what we keep talking about, which is the story we tell ourselves about ourselves and the story we tell the world about ourselves. Sometimes they're the same, sometimes they're not.
Well, and the more I was just thinking about this as you were talking, I was thinking the more, it's not just about being authentic, and it is about being authentic and knowing who you are, but it's also about like not being surprised by your reactions and having some predictability and kind of knowing what to expect from yourself, right? Like knowing what to expect from your own reactions. And I think so often when we don't take the time to do some of this work, as unfun as it can be, despite the fact that we said, oh, go play, it's fun. Whether it's the shadow work or taking the time to nurture your inner child, or to just reflect on and nurturing your inner child. I don't know, I cringe at a lot of this language, even though if I hear the right person say it to me, I'm all in, and if I don't, I'm not. But providing what maybe you didn't have, or wondering why you bristle at physical contact. Now, listen, there are people who don't like physical contact. So I'm not saying that like you're wrong for not liking physical contact, but going back and going, but maybe under the right circumstances, I would. And maybe the right circumstances for me now as an adult is a weighted blanket. Maybe I do want that feeling of pressure and warmth, and that would feel good for me right now. I don't want people touching me. And there's a long list. Partly, I just don't like it. And maybe there's some other reasons too beyond that I don't need to talk about. I don't know. But what would feel good right now, what would help me nurture me, is a weighted blanket. Like there's, I think, ways to reflect on and say, like, what are some things that maybe I didn't get? And some of it could be like, I don't know if you've ever done this, but like, I mean, I did have a caboodle, so I haven't bought myself a caboodle, and I did have a trapper keeper, but man, if one of those dolphin trapper keepers ever come back, like I've not really liked any of the styles, but if there's a dolphin one,
I've looked every time I've gone to the store. I always, because my kid is obsessed with stationery of all kinds. So
yes,
I always look for one.
And it's just like, but I think there's certain things like, and obviously like you're not going to heal all the wounds of your life by purchasing a caboodle or a trapper keeper. But if you were unable to buy something like that, either because you had a parent, because you weren't financially able to, and now you are, or because you weren't listened to when you said, I want the pink sparkly thing. And so just so we're clear, this wasn't me, because I never wanted the pink sparkly thing. But you're like, I want the pink sparkly thing, and your parents are like, no, your brother's hand-me-down's fine, or the black one's fine, whatever, we're just getting that one, just we're busy, we have to go, like just pick something, we have to go, they don't have it, we're not going to 2 stores. And you felt unheard. Well, sometimes it's not going to fix every problem in your life, but there are times that buying the trapper keeper now as an adult helps. It heals a wound.
It does. And I think you're raising a really good point in that there is a whole spectrum of things that we need to address in our lives, right? And sometimes those things require a therapist and, lots of talking, and maybe even some like somatic therapy and all sorts of things, right? Sometimes those are like real deep spiritual wounds. Sometimes our parents, I know I've done this with my kids, just don't have the time, finances, mental space to deal with whatever 45th request you're making for the day. But for you as a kid, you internalize that in a way it wasn't intended, right? And you internalize it. And this is terrifying about parenting, by the way. You
Yeah, I'm like, everything I've done in the last 2 days, I'm like, oh my God.
Oh,
my
I know.
God,
Absolutely.
Oh my
That's
God.
the hardest part of this whole conversation for me. But you internalize it as like, oh, well, I'm not worth the pink sparkly thing, right? Like I must not be worthwhile.
I'm
And
not deserving to be listened to, and they don't
right.
care about my opinion. And
When really it was they were overstimulated, had 45,000 things to do, no more money, and needed to make dinner, right? But the
yeah,
way you internalize it is the way you internalize it. So we can address some of those things, as you just said, Tova, with like very simple ways of simple but meaningful ways of taking care of ourselves, right? Like doing things for ourselves that nobody else did for us that we really wanted to have done, right? Like getting maybe you weren't allowed to get your nails done or wear makeup, right? And then you like felt like that made you not be yourself for whatever reason. And now you can do that as an adult, right? You can allow yourself those things and not judge other people and like be cool
yeah. I
with
mean,
it.
I just think of anytime you want to say like, I always wanted to blank. And sometimes it's like, I always wanted to be able to, I don't know, like get up early and have a peaceful morning. I don't know. I'm like, I have no idea what it would be.
Yeah.
I'm like, my brain is
Well, you
empty.
always wanted the trapper keeper, right? Like you always
Yeah, and I
wanted
do
that.
actually think I had a trapper keeper. So this is not I don't know. I don't know, but I definitely didn't have a dolphin one. And
Yeah.
I don't think I appreciated it if I did, like
Right.
the way that I would now.
Right.
Like I would be like, all my most important ideas are going in my trapper keeper.
I can just hear the sound of the Velcro coming apart. It's
Oh
like a
my
very
gosh.
specific.
And
Anyway.
just like you have to have a certain intention to open it.
Yeah.
You're like,
Yeah. So many things.
Oh my gosh.
We do have to move on because we have to wrap up soon, and I want to get to the shadow work stuff because I think that's even harder.
Yeah.
So let's just talk a little bit about identifying and integrating your shadow aspects, right? Um, Number one is therapy. This is like if there was a topic other than trauma where we would say find a therapist, this is probably for me anyway, one of the biggest ones. Why? Because it's hard. It's really, really hard. And also, an objective third person can see patterns in your behavior, your values, your actions, your thoughts, all these things that you cannot see. If you could have seen them, you would have seen them already, right? Somebody else can point these things out to you. You obviously, as the willing participant, have to be willing and ready to like do something about them. But the other part of why we want a therapist for some of this is they can deal with whatever is going to trigger you in a way that maybe your sister can't, your mom can't, right? Like if you have a trigger associated with some of this shadow work and it's like scary or dangerous or upsetting or like deeply depressing, having a trained professional by your side to help you through that process is essential. And I cannot emphasize that enough. I really just want you all to get therapists. I just do. It's so helpful for this. So how do we spot our inner shadow? Practice, right? Like this is a practice of doing it. First of all, I look at your habits. So habits can be great. Like habits can, like if Tova, you walk every day, that's a fantastic habit. Habits can also be really bad, right? Like they can be very unhealthy for us. Like if you have a habit of isolating yourself when you need help the most, that's not healthy. That's not good for you. I speak from personal experience on that one. So you got to pay attention to your triggers. You have to pay attention to what you project out onto other people. Do you meet somebody on the soccer field and you're like, oh my goodness, that lady is so annoying. All she does is complain. She's so negative. She's just miserable. If that's your reaction to that lady, like, I don't know. I mean, maybe she is, but like, do you also do the same thing? Do you dislike that in yourself? Are you having like a lot of negative thought patterns that you're communicating out into the world that, that's something to notice about yourself. It's not comfortable. Like it doesn't feel good to do this. So I think that's why a lot of people avoid it, right? Because it really doesn't feel good to be like, oh man, I'm being so negative lately. And this is like, I have a negative view of the world and I really don't want to, but like that doesn't feel great. I I don't enjoy it. So I don't imagine any of you will either. However, the flip side of this all is once you start noticing things, you can start changing them or accepting them or both. So
yeah, and I want to highlight what you just said.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're going to change them, and sometimes you're going to accept them. You're not, and this has nothing to do with like old dogs and new tricks and whatever.
Such
But
a
like,
terrible phrase.
it is so bad. I don't understand it, but
No.
I mean, I do understand it.
Yeah.
I just don't understand why it exists and why we say it. But the fact is, like, you're not perfect. I'm not perfect. You're not perfect. We're not perfect.
Yeah.
We would be uninteresting if we were. I mean, what I tell my kids over and over again, especially like my oldest gets very frustrated when his younger brothers do not do things exactly the way he wants them to do, and also very annoyed when they copy him. And I'm like, pick a lane, my friend. But I have said repeatedly to my children, not only do I not want your perfection, it is boring. I do not expect it. I do not want it. I am not looking for perfection from you. It is boring. I also do not want you to be the same. That also is boring. Do what you want to do. And it has been interesting watching my fifth grader go into middle school and wanting to try different things that his brother wanted to try, and me being like just yesterday in the car being like, don't listen to him. Like, if you want to do something, do what you want to do. Try what you want to try. Like, I know that my oldest is there. And I have a point about shadow work here. I know my oldest is there protecting his younger. This teacher is mean. This teacher is this. This teacher is this. Or watch out for this. Or you don't want to do that club because these are the kids that do that club. But he's bringing all of his other stuff into it, right? And my fifth grader is a different kid. He's a different person, and he has different interests. Many of them are the same, but he has different interests. He has different interactions with teachers. He is just a different human being. And I think we do the same interaction my 12 and 10-year-old have with each other, we do to ourselves so often. You can't be this way. You can't be that way. You don't want to be this way. Don't act that way. Like, we're going to do some things wrong. We're going to do some things right. There are personality traits that we have that we wish could be different. And some of them, when we learn why we do it, when we learn maybe why we don't stand up and show up for ourselves, we can learn to show up for ourselves.
Yeah.
Like when we teach ourselves that we're worthy to show up for ourselves, we can start showing up for ourselves. But there are other things that we just are that way, and we're just like, not going to remember certain things, or we're not going to do certain things. And like, that is okay. So this whole process is not about, you're going to learn all of this stuff so you can get better and change. It's just about knowing who you are, all the parts of you.
Yeah. It's an integrative practice, right? We do have to wrap up, but I just want to like quickly run through some of these things. So when you are identifying or integrating your shadow into your whole self, obviously think back to your childhood. What parts of you as a kid were treated as bad, lesser, shameful? Did somebody tell you you were always too loud? You were always too quiet? You smiled too much, not enough? Like these kinds of things, they get integrated into us and turn into beliefs. Really avoid shaming your shadow, because you're just shaming yourself. And that's not going to help, right? When we feel ashamed, we don't make changes. We don't address what's going on with us. We feel shame. Meditation can help. As Tova mentioned, a shadow journal can also help. They have them like on Amazon. You can just buy one, or you can start your own.
I had mine like right here. It apparently sold like a bajillion copies from the TikTok.
Yeah.
It's a TikTok hero, and everybody wants it. So
yeah. Well, we'll post a link to it in the show notes. Expressing your shadow side artistically, whatever that looks like for you, whether it's movement, whether it's drawing, painting, singing, any of those things, and starting an inner dialogue. So start talking to yourself, start talking to your inner child, start talking to the version of you that you don't like, and see what's going on there. And again, try to do it compassionately.
Okay, one more thing. I know we're wrapping up. But we, as you said, and you mentioned it a couple of times, we are often very hard on people who are exhibiting and judgmental of people who are exhibiting things that we don't like about ourselves. And once we recognize that, this can be a really neat, exciting opportunity, because suddenly the things that they're doing, you are not only do you show yourself compassion, but you're showing them compassion. And people who used to bother you to be around no longer bother you to be around. And
Right.
that in itself is a gift.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially if they're family members or friends who you're going to be around.
Right. So I think it's pretty clear what the benefits to this is, doing this is, but just to double clarify, I guess, doing this practice can help you gain more confidence and self-esteem, improve your creativity, help your relationships with other people. I mean, just think about how many times you're projecting something onto other people and you're just like, I don't want that person in my life. Well, maybe you just need to address some of these things in yourself. Improves your self-acceptance. You can discover your hidden talents. I like this one. The article I got this from says you can use shadow work to uncover what some people call the gold in your shadow bags. In other words, your inner strengths and resources that you didn't realize you had before. Discovering new stuff about yourself is always helpful. Sometimes it's hard and unpleasant, but it is helpful at the end of the day.
I like the gold in your shadow bag.
I know you love bags and like putting things in buckets, so I thought you might like that.
I both like figurative, like pretend bags, and real bags.
Yeah, no, I know. So those are some of the benefits to doing this. Why did we talk about these two things together? Obviously, they are connected, they are related. Some of your shadow self comes from that wounded inner child, right? And so when we start working on both of these things, we start healing that wound. Some of your shadow self just exists because it's part of your personality, and that's how it goes. Like I'm never going to not be an introvert. That's not changing. I can't be like, I'm going to shadow work that away. No, I'm not. That's who I am. But when we have a better understanding of these aspects of our personality and our lives and our existence on this planet, we have the capability to become more integrated, to become more authentic. And I don't mean authentic like you just tell the truth all the time. I mean authentic like you believe in who you are and you put that person out in the world, good, bad, ugly, beautiful, neutral, whatever it is, and you let your weird flag out. And I think that is good for all of us when we are more ourselves. We've talked about this a million times. The more vulnerable you are with the world, the more vulnerable it will be with you. And I think everyone benefits from that. So we have to wrap up. I did not figure out the homework for this, but I think it's pretty clear that really you just start, right? So think about where you want to start. Do you have a therapist? Do you want to find a therapist? Do you want to start with some of that shadow work? Or, maybe just get a journal and start thinking about things, habits that you have, projections that you find yourself doing, or things that, you don't have that you would like to have. And I don't mean like physical things. I mean like emotional states. I mean, like ideas about yourself that you haven't been able to reach. Start writing some of that stuff down and think about what we talked about in this episode about your inner child. Is there a wound there that needs some attention? Can you do something about it? If you need support, please, please, please join our weekly women's circle. It is such a kind and compassionate place to be. I know I'm tooting our own horns, but honestly, we're kind and compassionate people, and so are the ladies in the circle. So, it's not a lie. Join us. You can sign up for that directly from our website at goboldlyinitiative.com, or you can find the link in our social media profiles at Go Boldly Together. We'd love to have you there. It is, like I said, just a delightful place to be every week. I think that's it, Tova, unless you have something else.
I mean, apparently I have a lot to say about this, but I think
we
that's
both
all.
do.
I think I had more than I thought I had to say, honestly. But I think that's it for now.
All right. So we'll be back next week with another episode from season 11. Until then, everyone, good luck with your journaling. We will talk to you very soon.
Thanks so much for listening to We Go Boldly podcast. We know you're busy and we love spending time with you.
If you enjoyed this week's episode, let us know. Head to Apple Podcasts right now to rate and review our show. While you're there, be sure to click that subscribe button.
Want more us time? Follow us on all the socials at Go Boldly Together.
Want even more us time? As in all the coaching pizzazz. Find us at goboldlyinitiative.com for all the info.
We will be back with more excitement, research, and deep thoughts next week.
Until then, keep on being the bold, brave, amazing people we know you already are.
The Power Moms Network, empowering moms to lift the world.